Welcome to Fresh Talk News Channel. Today, we dive into a jaw-dropping courtroom drama where a corrupt anti-Trump judge humiliates JD Vance, only to face swift karma when his target fights back, leaving the entire courtroom in stunned silence. But before we get into the details, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. The day began like any other in the federal courthouse, except for Judge Marshall Davis's unusually foul mood. "No coffee in my courtroom," he barked at his clerk, making the young woman flinch. "Tell that defense team if they're not here in 2 minutes, I'm issuing contempt charges." The packed gallery watched as Davis stormed to his bench, his face flushed with irritation. Known for his harsh treatment, his behavior had become increasingly erratic, especially in cases involving conservative figures. "Your Honor," the court clerk approached cautiously, "Vice President Vance has arrived for his testimony." Davis's expression darkened instantly. "Well, isn't that special?" he sneered, not even attempting to hide his disdain. "Make sure he knows this isn't the Senate floor. In my courtroom, his title means nothing." The atmosphere shifted noticeably when JD Vance entered. He moved with quiet dignity, nodding respectfully to the court staff. Davis watched him like a hawk, drumming his fingers impatiently on the bench. "Let's get something straight," Davis announced, his voice dripping with contempt. "I don't care what position you hold in Washington. In this courtroom, I am the law. Is that clear, Mr. Vance?" The vice president's measured response only seemed to irritate Davis further. "Crystal clear, Your Honor. I'm here simply as a witness to the truth." "Truth?" Davis scoffed. "We'll see about that." His gaze shifted to the defense table. "Let's get this circus started." For the record, Davis interrupted the defense attorney's opening statement, "I'm already tired of the political theatrics in my courtroom." He shot a pointed look at Vance. "This isn't a campaign rally." The defense attorney tried again, "Your Honor, we're simply establishing the context of Mr. Sterling's charitable." "The context?" Davis barked out a laugh. "The context is that your client is accused of tax evasion. Period. I don't need a history lesson about his so-called charitable work." Every time the attorney mentioned Sterling's community contributions, Davis would cut him off with increasing hostility. "Irrelevant. Move on. I won't warn you again." His gavel slammed down so often the court reporter had trouble keeping up. When it was time for Vance's testimony, Davis's behavior became even more erratic. "Stand up straight when you take the oath," he snapped, though Vance's posture was impeccable. "And speak clearly. I won't have any political doublespeak in my court." "Your Honor," Vance began calmly, "I can attest to Mr. Sterling's financial transparency regarding the Faith and Family Foundation." "Oh, here we go," Davis interrupted, rolling his eyes theatrically. "Another conservative fairy tale about family values." The gallery stirred uncomfortably. Even the prosecution looked uneasy at the judge's obvious bias, but Davis was just getting started. "Let me be clear," he leaned forward, his face red. "I've seen enough rich conservatives try to hide their money behind charitable facades. Your presence here doesn't impress me, Mr. Vice President. In fact, it makes me question the defendant's character even more." Vance remained composed, but something in his calm demeanor seemed to further enrage Davis. The judge's hands trembled slightly as he shuffled through his papers, his eyes darting nervously to specific documents on his desk. "I have here," Vance continued steadily, "documented evidence of Mr. Sterling's charitable contributions, including the March Foundation meetings. Those records are inadmissible." Davis practically shouted, though no objection had been raised. His reaction seemed oddly personal, almost panicked. "Your Honor," the defense attorney stood, "on what grounds? You dare question my rulings." Davis's face was now bright red. "One more word, and you'll be joining your client in contempt." The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This was beyond judicial discretion, it was starting to look like a personal vendetta. Your Honor, Vance spoke up, his voice remaining respectfully firm, these documents were properly submitted during discovery. Oh, were they? Davis sneered. And I suppose your fancy White House connections had nothing to do with that. Let me tell you something about your kind, Mr. Vice President. You think you can waltz into my courtroom with your political privilege and, objection, Your Honor, the defense attorney found his courage. This is completely inappropriate. Silence. Davis roared, slamming his gavel so hard it echoed through the chamber. I will not be lectured about appropriateness in my own court, especially not by some conservative puppet and his, Your Honor, Vance interjected calmly, perhaps we should discuss the specific contents of the March 15th meeting. The change in Davis's demeanor was instant and striking. The rage in his face gave way to something else. Was it fear? His hand froze in midair with the gavel. He stared at Vance as if seeing him for the first time. Those meetings are not relevant to these proceedings, he managed, his voice suddenly less certain. But his eyes kept darting to a particular folder on his bench, one that seemed to have appeared that very morning. Not relevant? Vance asked quietly. That's interesting, Your Honor, considering those meetings directly involve charitable contributions to, enough. Davis slammed both hands on his bench. One more word about those meetings, and I'll have you removed. The gallery watched in stunned silence as the judge's composure continued to crumble. His hands were visibly shaking now as he shuffled papers on his desk, desperately trying to regain control of the situation. In fact, Davis continued, his voice taking on a manic edge, I'm holding you in contempt right now. You think your position protects you? You're nothing but a Trump lackey in an expensive suit. Your Honor, Vance remained unfazed, my position has nothing to do with this. But since you mentioned protection, perhaps we should discuss the Liberty Foundation's protection payments. Davis's face went from red to white in an instant. How dare you? I mean, what payments? There were no, guards, remove this man from my courtroom. The court officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. Davis's behavior had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Actually, Your Honor, Vance reached for his briefcase, I have some very interesting bank records here. Would you like to explain the monthly deposits from offshore accounts that coincidentally align with your rulings against conservative defendants? Shut up. Davis screamed, completely losing his judicial demeanor. You have no right, no authority. I am the law here, me. Not some conservative bootlicker who, Vance calmly held up a document. Your signature on these authorization forms suggests otherwise, Your Honor. The judge's next reaction shocked even his own staff. He lunged forward, pointing a trembling finger at Vance. You planted those. This is a setup, a conservative conspiracy too, he caught himself, but too late. His outburst had revealed far more than any evidence could. A conspiracy? Vance echoed softly. Interesting choice of words, Your Honor, especially given your private meetings with certain activist groups. I will not be interrogated in my own court. Davis was practically foaming at the mouth now. You think you can come in here with your smug face and your evidence? He spat the last word like it was poison. Evidence, Vance continued calmly, that shows a disturbing pattern. Like the Thompson case last month, where a small business owner lost everything because you wouldn't allow evidence of his charitable work to be presented, just like today. Davis's laugh was almost hysterical. The Thompson case? That conservative fraud deserved what he got. They all deserve it. These people think they can hide behind their faith and family values while, or perhaps, Vance interjected, pulling out another document, we should discuss the Wilson hearing, where you mysteriously sealed all records just hours after meeting with representatives from the Liberty Foundation. The judge's face twitched violently. How do you know about? He stopped abruptly, realizing his slip. Know about what, Your Honor? The meeting? Or the $100,000 that appeared in your offshore account the next day? The gallery erupted in murmurs. Davis slammed his gavel repeatedly, but each strike seemed more desperate than the last. Order! Order! I will have order! His voice cracked with panic. This is all fabricated, a conservative plot to, like Mrs. Anderson's case, Vance pressed on, a grandmother who lost her life savings because you wouldn't let her explain where the money came from. Interesting how the company that sued her donated to your re-election campaign just weeks before. Shut up! Davis screamed, his composure completely shattered. You have no right, no authority. I am the law here, me. No, Your Honor, Vance's calm voice cut through the chaos. You're not the law. You're supposed to serve it. Like when you took your oath of office, the same day you opened that account in the Caymans. Davis stood up, his robes disheveled, pointing wildly at Vance. Guards, arrest this man for contempt. Seize those documents, all of them. Now. What are you waiting for? Davis screamed at the hesitating officers. I gave you an order, arrest him. Before they do that, Your Honor, Vance spoke up, his composure intact, perhaps we should discuss why you're so eager to seize these particular documents. I don't have to explain myself to you. Davis was now pacing behind his bench like a caged animal. I am a federal judge. My decisions are final. My authority is absolute. Absolute authority, Vance replied thoughtfully. Seems to be a recurring theme with you, Your Honor. Just like in the Williams case last week, where you ordered all evidence of your private meeting sealed. Davis froze mid-stride. How did you? Those records were supposed to be, he caught himself again, but the damage was done. Supposed to be what, Your Honor? Destroyed? Like the records from the Liberty Foundation meetings? Enough! Davis roared, his face contorted with fury. You self-righteous conservatives think you can come into my courtroom and expose. He stopped abruptly, realizing what he'd almost revealed. Expose what, exactly? Vance pressed, his voice steady. The systematic abuse of judicial power? The coordinated targeting of conservative defendants? Or perhaps the payments you've been receiving to, I said silence. Davis screamed, completely losing control. He grabbed his gavel and hurled it across the courtroom, narrowly missing his own clerk. You want to talk about abuse of power? I'll show you abuse of power. Officers, I want this man in handcuffs now. And anyone who refuses my order will be joining him in jail. The courtroom had become eerily silent. Even the judge's heavy breathing seemed amplified in the tense atmosphere. The officers still hadn't moved, their faces showing clear conflict between duty and conscience. Last chance, Mr. Vance, Davis snarled, his voice dripping with venom. Hand over those documents and submit to arrest, or I'll make sure you never set foot in another courtroom again. That's an interesting threat, Your Honor, Vance replied, opening another folder. Almost identical to what you told Sarah Mitchell before dismissing her discrimination case, right after your meeting with CEO James Peterson. Davis's face went ghostly pale. What? How did you, Peterson, Vance continued calmly, who deposited $500,000 into your Cayman account? The same Peterson who hosted that private yacht meeting last month, the one where 7 other judges were present, all of whom mysteriously ruled in his favor the following week. You have no right. Davis screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. Those records are privileged. Those conversations were private, you illegally, private? Vance asked softly. Like the recordings from your chambers? The ones where you explicitly told your clerk to lose evidence that would have exonerated 3 conservative defendants? The clerk, still at her desk, burst into tears. He made me do it, she sobbed. He said he'd ruin my career if I didn't. Silence. Davis roared, but his authority was crumbling. None of this is admissible. You can't prove, actually, Vance interrupted, everything was obtained legally. Your own security cameras caught the midnight document shredding. Your own phone recorded the threats. Your own signature authorized the transfers. Davis lunged forward, reaching desperately across his bench toward Vance's evidence folder. Give me those files. I order you to. Order denied, the new voice came from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned to see a team of FBI agents making their way down the center aisle. This court is now under federal investigation, the lead agent announced, his badge glinting under the courtroom lights. Judge Marshall Davis, stay where you are. You can't do this. Davis shrieked, backing away from his bench. I have immunity. I have connections. Do you know who I am? Oh, we know exactly who you are, Your Honor, the agent replied. Including your recent meetings with the Liberty Foundation, your offshore accounts, and your coordinated efforts to target conservative defendants. Davis's eyes darted wildly around the courtroom, looking for escape. This is all a setup, a conservative plot too, a plot? Vance interjected quietly. The only plot here was your systematic abuse of power, Your Honor. Every biased ruling, every backroom deal, every attempt to silence the truth, it all ends today. You planned this, Davis pointed a trembling finger at Vance. You and your Trump-loving conspirators set me up. No, Your Honor, Vance shook his head. You set yourself up. We simply gave you enough rope to hang yourself with. Your own words and actions today have confirmed everything we already knew. As FBI agents approached the bench, Davis made one final desperate attempt to maintain control. I am a federal judge. You can't arrest me. I am the law. I am the law. The agents had to physically restrain Davis as he tried to lunge toward his chambers. You don't understand, he screamed. They made me do it. The Foundation, they have dirt on everyone. If I talk now, that's interesting, the lead FBI agent said. Tell us more about this foundation, Your Honor. But Davis had finally caught himself, realizing how much he'd revealed in his panic. His face twisted into a sneer despite his trembling hands. I want my lawyer. And when this is over, you'll all pay for this humiliation. Speaking of payment, Vance stepped forward, producing another document. Perhaps you'd like to explain these transfer records. 7 judges, all receiving similar payments on the same days you did, all ruling against conservative defendants in coordinated cases. The gallery erupted in shocked whispers. This wasn't just about one corrupt judge, it was an entire network. The evidence suggests, Vance continued, his voice carrying across the now silent courtroom, that this was a systematic effort to use the judicial system as a political weapon. But justice isn't meant to be a weapon, Your Honor. It's meant to be a shield, protecting all Americans equally. Davis had stopped struggling against the agents, his face a mask of defeat as the full scope of his exposure became clear. Behind him, court officers were already sealing his chambers for investigation. His clerk was being questioned by FBI agents, tears streaming down her face as she admitted to being forced to destroy evidence under threats from the judge. Davis's final walk of shame out of his own courtroom was a powerful symbol of justice being served. But as the agents led him away in handcuffs, he turned one last time to face JD Vance. You think this changes anything? He spat bitterly. There will always be others like me. You can't stop us all. You're right about one thing, Vance replied quietly. There will always be those who abuse power. But there will also always be those who stand up against them. That's what makes our justice system work, not the corruption you represent, but the courage of those who fight against it. The aftermath was swift and far-reaching. Davis's arrest triggered a wave of investigations across multiple jurisdictions. The network of corrupt judges began to crumble as evidence mounted and witnesses came forward. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Sterling's case was dismissed. The new judge, reviewing the evidence Davis had tried so desperately to suppress, found no basis for the charges, because at the end of the day, justice isn't decided by those who seek to control it, but by those willing to defend it. And if you believe in standing up for truth and accountability, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories. God bless you, and God bless America. Thanks for watching Fresh Talk News channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more news and updates.